Welcome to another episode of the Longevity Blueprint Podcast. I'm delighted today to have a local guest, also here from Iowa, who has worldwide recognition for her transformation and how she's transforming the lives of others through her Wahls Protocol. Dr. Terry Wahls is a clinical professor at the University of Iowa, where she conducts clinical trials testing the efficacy of therapeutic lifestyle to treat multiple sclerosis-related symptoms. In addition, she's the author of the Wahls Protocol, a radical new way to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions using paleo principles, and the cookbook, the Wahls Protocol, Cooking for Life, the revolutionary modern paleo plan to treat all chronic autoimmune conditions. So, Dr. Wahls, it's an honor to have you on the podcast today.
Great. Thank you for having me.
So when I decided to launch this podcast, you came to mind. I thought, I need to have Dr. Wahls on the show because you have an incredible story. And you have shared all of what you've now learned with others, and you're currently even conducting research. So let's just cut right to the chase and open with your incredible story. Your book opens telling the reader how invincible you once felt. So what happened to change that?
Yeah, before medical school, I was a martial artist, black belt, competed nationally in full contact taekwondo, and felt invincible. Got into medical school, and then, I noticed during my third year, I started having episodes of discomfort, face pain, that seemed to be more frequent when I was stressed, sleep deprived. Nothing seemed to help those. And that came and went. Then 7 years after that time period, I had a period of dim vision in my left eye. And I was evaluated for that, as well as my face pains. They tried some drugs, developed drug rash, and I just had to tough it out. And these would come and go. Then in 2000, so now 20 years after my first onset of facial pain, I developed leg weakness. And I was back to my neurologist, got a big workup, and then this time they saw lesions in one in my brain, a couple in my spinal cord, and said that this is probably relapsing remitting MS. I, again, being a academic physician, I wanted to treat my disease aggressively. So I did some research, found the best MS center that I could find in the Midwest, saw the best people, took the newest drugs, and went steadily downhill anyway. Then I was told about the work of Loren Cordain and the paleo-diet. I read his books, his papers, and it was a big deal because I had been a vegetarian for 20 years. So with some prayer and meditation, I went back to eating meat. But I continued to decline. The next year, I needed a tilt-recline wheelchair. I took chemotherapy. I continued to decline. Then I took the new biologic drugs. I continued to decline. Then I switched to other potent immune suppressing drugs. But it's very clear that the very best conventional approaches were clearly not stopping my slide towards a bedridden, possibly demented life, possibly intractable pain, because my face pain had been steadily getting to be more difficult to manage over those 20 years. And fortunately, that's when I said, I got to do everything that I possibly can. I started reading the basic science. I read the animal models for MS, for Parkinson's, for Alzheimer's, for ALS, for all types of neurodegeneration. I decided that mitochondria were key. I would ultimately begin creating a supplement cocktail that did seem to slow my decline and help my fatigue, a little bit. But of course, I'm very grateful because I know, given the history of my MS, that clearly I was not improving. So I was just thrilled that I seemed to be slowing my decline. Then I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I had a great course in neuroprotection. I took that. I'm reading more ancestral health. I'm reading more functional medicine. And so I have a bigger supplement list. Not a lot's happened yet. But then I had this really phenomenal aha moment, like, what if I redesign my paleo diet to get these nutrients I'm taking in supplement for from the food? So that's actually several more months of research to reorganize my eating plan. Still paleo, but now a very structured paleo. And so I start this new highly structured way of eating December 26th, 2007. And at that time, I was unable to sit up in a regular chair. If I sat in a regular chair more than 10 minutes, I was so exhausted, I'm bedridden for the rest of the day. It's a struggle to walk 10 feet using 2 walking sticks. I'm beginning to have cognitive decline. My face pain is much more difficult to manage. And I knew I was on the cusp of being forced into medical retirement. So to my utter surprise, as I, implementing this new way of eating, by the end of January, I'm like, I have more energy, and my thinking is clear, and I can sit up at the table to eat again. And in 3 months, I'm walking around the hospital for the first time with walking sticks in about 4 years, and people are stunned.
Yeah.
Then at 6 months, I get on my bike. We have this emergency family meeting, so can I try biking again? And what we work out is that my son will jog on the left, my daughter will jog on the right, my wife will follow on her bike. And in fact, I'm able to bike around the block. My son is crying, my daughter's crying, my wife's crying, I'm crying. If I talk about it much longer, I'll start crying because, that was just so miraculous then, because I had accepted when you have a progressive neurologic disorder, you get to a point where you just accept that you'll take one day at a time because recovery is just not possible. And so all that I had done was to slow my decline. I had no idea that I'd be able to stop the decline, and then even less idea that, I could get better.
And you did.
And I did, remarkably so. So, at a year, I was able to do an 18.5-mile bike ride with my family. So, of course, this really changes the way I interact with my patients. It changes my understanding of disease and health. It changes ultimately the type of research that I do. And that was, of course, a few bumps in that transition because people were a little uneasy at first. They were thrilled to see me walking around, but they were a little uncertain when they saw how I changed my practice.
Sure. Well, let's talk about what you discovered. You talk a lot in your book about cellular dysfunction and broken biochemistry, and
Yeah.
you alluded to changing your diet, which I'm assuming you're getting at feeding your mitochondria. So can you tell us more about
Yeah.
how you did modify your diet to feed your mitochondria and what those are?
Yeah. So, the reason I'm so keen on mitochondria is that our cells really rely on the mitochondria to convert the food we eat into an energy form that our cells can use to run the chemistry of life. And so we're so dependent on these mitochondria to do a good job of generating all that chemical energy, also known as ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And so I originally, used all these supplements targeting on, particular chemical steps and pathways that I knew were important for mitochondria. And that was really very helpful. It was the first time that I actually had some sense of hope that I was slowing the speed of my decline, in that these drugs that I was taking, costing thousands of dollars every month and gave me terrible side effects. But, I was even more afraid of becoming more disabled more rapidly. So I was thrilled to take them. But I was also really thrilled to see like these supplements were clearly having a positive effect. And then when I had that big aha, like, okay, what if I redesign my diet to get the nutrients that are that's taken in supplement form, that, if I did that, I'd probably get some additional compounds in the food, because food is vastly more complicated than specific supplements. I had this idea that I would probably get other things that were really good for my mitochondria, and probably good for my brain, and probably good for all of my cellular structures. And of course, when I asked my registered dietitian colleagues, I gave them the list of nutrients, they're like, well, I don't know. I don't have an intern who could do that, and I'm sorry, I can't help you. So, it took me several months to get that research done. But fortunately, I was able to find that in part with the Linus Pauling Institute on Micronutrients. It's very helpful.
They have a wonderful website. I refer to them.
Yeah, I think it's a great resource.
So let's break down what foods are incorporated in the Wahls Protocol. And then we can talk about what foods are removed. But let's talk about specifically the cups of greens and kind of get into what you're adding.
So, when I designed the Wahls Protocol, I also made it sort of multiple levels, so you could make your transition from your standard American diet to the level 1 diet. And here I'm focusing on adding a lot more diversity to your diet. I want people to get more green leafy vegetables, things like romaine lettuce, spinach, turnip greens, kale, parsley, cilantro, basil. There's a lot of benefit with those carotenoids, with the vitamin K, with the magnesium, with the vitamin C,
Sure.
and of course, folate. And then the next category is the sulfur-rich vegetables. These are the cabbage family, onion family, mushroom family vegetables. Sulfur is a really important component in how we detox and remove toxins out of our body. It's an important component in some key enzymes in our antioxidant machinery in our cells to protect our cells from damage. And they're a key component in a lot of enzymes in the brain that are important for making some neurotransmitters. So sulfur is a very, very important compound. The cabbage family, onion family provide substrates for those compounds, and they also boost the efficiency of a lot of these enzymes in our cells as well. So that's a key nutrient. And then the third category is probably really the easiest one for people to get to, and that's the deeply colored. And I'm looking for blue, purple, black, yellow, orange, and vegetables or berries. And depending, and we have so many studies really that show us the more color that you have in your diet, the more fruits and vegetables, particularly non-starchy fruits and vegetables, the lower the rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, insulin resistance, cognitive decline, mental health issues, and cancers. And so hugely, hugely important and beneficial.
So not just for autoimmune conditions, for all chronic disease. I mean, this is how everyone should essentially be eating.
Correct. Correct. Well, they'll certainly, the science would certainly say that lots of reasons to expect that your health would improve just by ramping up your vegetables, ramping up the sulfur-containing vegetables, the leafy green vegetables, and deeply pigmented stuff. And when I taught this concept to my vets, I said, the way to figure out is it colorful? You take a knife and cut the item in half. If you've got pigment all the way through, then we'll count that as colored. So, beets, carrots, berries, that's colored. Peaches, that's colored. Apricots, that's colored. Apples, pears, bananas are white. They're pretty high in starch, pretty high in carbs. There are some health benefits, but they don't have all of those antioxidants that I'm looking for in that colored category. So my advice is, it's the target is 9 cups of vegetables and berries, or so it's 3 plates per day. Yeah, my vets would say, like, so is that per week or month, doc? That's no, that's per day. They're like, wow. Or you could eat organ meat, have liver a little more frequently, and they'd usually say, I'll eat the vegetables.
Tell us about one of your favorite recipes. So, and I actually cooked this weekend. You have mentioned, I've heard you speak about cooking bacon, and then
so this is the basic recipe that we use, and I teach our vets if they're meat eaters. Take a couple strips of bacon, fry them in your skillet to the desired level of doneness. Take the bacon out, chop it up, set it aside, add your vegetables in a tablespoon of water, put the lid on for 2 minutes. If you're doing greens, I'll cook the bacon in a stock pot so you have nice big walls. That way when I dump in the greens and I'm stirring them around, because you just want to stir them around till they're wilted. Spinach, that's like 30 seconds. Kale, that might be a minute or two.
Sure.
Asparagus, that's probably a minute or two. So you just want your greens wilted, your vegetables, you want them slightly, a little bit crunchy yet. And then you add in the chopped bacon and you serve that. And I tell my vets, if it's not delicious, double the bacon and do it again. And they're like, wow, that does sound pretty delicious. So the reason our vegetables become bitter is that they're a little more alkaline. And so we experience that alkaline taste as bitter.
Sure.
And so we can counter that by having more fat, such as clarified butter, olive oil, or bacon fat, duck fat, tallow. That would certainly work as well. And then if it still seems a bit bitter, you could add a little vinegar that you enjoy, balsamic vinegar or lemon juice, lime juice, to get it to that pH and get rid of that bitterness.
Perfect.
And I would say that my kids have found that, the bacon and greens is their favorite vegetable.
Agreed. I think that's a good combination.
It is just perfect.
So we've talked about foods that we need to add into our diet. What do we need to remove? So what are the inflammatory food
Yeah.
groups that you found most beneficial to remove?
So if you have an autoimmune issue, or if you have a mental health or neurologic issue, I think it's really important to remove gluten and casein. Now, gluten is the protein in wheat, rye, barley, and many ancient grains, and casein is the protein in dairy. The reason for that is that many people with an autoimmune issue or with a brain-related issue have unrecognized sensitivity to gluten. So that if you have a leaky gut and you eat food containing gluten or casein, a part of that incompletely digested food will get into your bloodstream and it will piss off your innate immune cells. And they will secrete more inflammatory cytokines, which will make your autoimmune symptoms much worse and will make your mental health issues and neurologic issues much worse. And, let's see, Alessio Fasano, who is the big celiac expert in the Harvard Hospital Group, that's his area of research. It is his position that for people with autoimmune issues, a leaky gut is always happening, and that gluten will open up those gates, make the gut leakier, and then you can get the gluten. If you're sensitive to gluten, that's going to be a big problem. But even if you're not sensitive to gluten, if your gates are opened and you have bacterial fragments getting into your bloodstream, the lipopolysaccharides, LPS, that will activate your innate immune cells. You'll have more inflammation, more insulin resistance, more mental health, neurologic symptoms, and if you have an autoimmune component, more symptoms in that type of autoimmunity, whether it's skin, if you got issues with psoriasis, or joints if you have rheumatoid arthritis, or like me, your neurologic symptoms if you have MS.
Sure. I like to tell my patients consuming gluten is like adding gasoline to a fire. So when your body's already on alert, attacking itself, and then we feed ourselves these inflammatory grains that are worsening the leaky gut situation, unfortunately, that's just triggering that fire to continue. And we have to not just lessen the fuel to the fire, we have to put the fire out. We need to not consume those foods at all.
Yeah, I also give that same message. I'm mindful, and we talk about the addictive nature of gluten, of casein, and of processed foods. That the casein molecule and the gluten molecule will stimulate the same kind of receptors that the opioids, morphine, would stimulate, are endorphins that we get from vigorous exercise. And so when people say, like, Doc, I can't imagine giving up cheese and bread, I'm like, I understand that you may be experiencing some addictive relationship to those foods. And so then if I am able to have a conversation about, okay, how can we help make your environment more successful, given that you have this relationship that you've already identified will make it difficult for you to be successful.
So that kind of leads me into a next question, is really finding the motivation behind the behavior change. As a clinician, that's something that's important for me to find with my patients.
That's a great topic. Because we do research and we're writing up stuff all of the time. We have just been looking at the measure of compliance, adherence. How often do patients do the things that we say? So if you and I are just asking people to take a supplement or a medication, 75% will take the medication 80% of the time. So if all we're asking you to do is just to take a pill, If we ask them to change their diet, less than 25% will do that.
Wow.
And they're like, okay, it's very rare that people actually make these changes, even when we educate why it's so incredibly important. And then, so I'm looking at what's the biology of why that is so hard. We're wired biologically to crave sugar, salt, fat, and sex, which is why we eat food, have sex, make babies. Those are really important things for us as a species. So that's been rewarded over millions of generations. And we're rewarded, our brain's wired to reward pleasure. And future benefit is greatly discounted for today's pleasure. So if I'm asking you to give up pleasurable foods, to endure discomfort of withdrawal, headaches, malaise, when you give up these prickly, yummy, delicious foods that you crave for a future benefit, so you're going to feel worse acutely, that is an enormously difficult ask. And I think for many clinicians, we are not as forthright about how difficult that ask is. So I think that's one flaw that we have. Another area where I spend a lot more time is thinking about how do I motivate my patients to do this work? Because it is work. It's creating new habits is work. Extinguishing old habits is work. It takes a lot of effort. We're going to have to work at it again and again. And so here's where a couple of questions that can be so helpful. What do you want your health for? What would you like to be doing? If we could improve your health, what would be meaningful to you? And so, for example, my son is getting married this fall. And so if someone has a wedding of someone that's really important to them, it might be important for them to dance at their daughter's wedding or their son's wedding, or it might be important to see their son or daughter graduate from high school or college or get married or the grandchild be born. So if we can help that person identify something that they want their health for. And if they can't, then I need to send them off to talk therapy to help them enrich their life. So there is something that they care that much for. Because if there is nothing that they care that much for, it's going to be very difficult for them to do this work.
Sure. I think it's important. One thing that I tell my patients to do is put that why on their mirror in their bathroom, so they're looking at that every morning. Zig Ziglar said, motivation doesn't last, but neither does a shower, and that's why we have to participate every single
I like
day.
that.
And so I think having that goal right in front of them first thing in the morning, I'm going to eat clean today because, this is my goal, this is my why. I think just looking at that every single day is important.
Yeah. And we talk about free writing, that I encourage people to have a journal. And that if you want to write a long time, that's fine. But if all you want to do is just put in one sentence, that's fine. But over time, that reflection on what are your challenges at life towards meeting this goal that you've identified can be very helpful.
Sure. I think that was a wonderful part of the conference that I attended a few years ago of yours. I had thought about this with my clients, but I hadn't really been implementing it to the extent that I should have been. And so I appreciate you incorporating that. So let's talk about your conference. Tell me about the Wahls Protocol seminar.
Yeah. Well, so the seminars are a very, very fun event. We do that every summer, and we have hundreds and hundreds of people coming every year, and more clinicians coming so we can get them trained. And what I do is I teach people how to do the Wahls Protocol, the dietary interventions. We talk about all of the other lifestyle factors, stress, exercise, detox. I have some guest speakers. You were marvelous. We got great comments about your talks, by the way.
Thank you.
And then we talk a lot about creating resilience.
Yes.
How do we get to why to make all of this? And so that's and this year we're doing 4 versions of that. Last year we did it in 3 sessions. This year we're doing it in 4 sessions because I've learned over time that, when people succeed or fail, it's not because you and I didn't order the right test. It's not because we didn't suggest the right supplement. It's because we couldn't help them be successful with implementing the recommended diet and lifestyle, that it was such a big ask for them to create these new habits and to extinguish the old ones. So each year I give this, we put more effort on helping people and supporting them through that process. And then this year, because of the pandemic, I'm looking like, well, the information is more critical, but I don't know that we're gonna be able to have hundreds of people together in a small space, nor do I want my people getting in a plane flying. So we've converted it to a virtual event. And so we're doing a couple hours every Sunday, an hour every Wednesday. I give people homework, and so they can elect to do the homework or not, but we go over their homework on Wednesday and break out into small groups and talk to one another. Because one of the things that I find that's so helpful is that getting that peer-to-peer conversation about, here's my experience of doing the protocol, here's my experience of extinguishing those bad habits, creating these new habits, to talk to one another. Because our patients hear it from you and I, and we're the expert, but we don't know how difficult it is. But when they hear it from someone else who's just another patient like them, like that they were successful, it gives them insights that they could not hear from me, or probably could not hear from you.
I think one thing that I took home also sitting at the table, so I did speak at your conference on the relationship between autoimmunity and hormones, because hormones are so neuroprotective and anti-inflammatory. They're a vital piece of the longevity blueprint that I talked about in my book. But I attended also to become certified. And actually, for those listening, you can find Wahls Certified Health Professionals on her website, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But I was very amazed, one, at the reach of all the attendees. As far as there was a woman from Hungary, I think, at my table.
Yeah.
From Canada. Women were, and men, but women primarily were at my table from all over the world. And they were all at various I would say stages of recovery. So one woman had just been diagnosed literally a few weeks prior. Some had been coming to your conference for years. So it was really unique to see women at all different stages of their journey, being able to be an example and a coach for their peers. I was shocked. It was very inspiring. Yeah.
It's one of the benefits of my time with the VA, because I ran a group class there, because there's such demand to see me and my level of expertise. I didn't want people to have to wait too long. So we kept doing this in groups and bigger and bigger and bigger groups. And what I discovered is that groups are even more powerful. They make this change even more effective if we can figure out a way for these patients to interact in a group together to get that peer support.
Absolutely. You also had some Wahls Warriors testimonies at some Wahls Warriors shared their testimonies at your conference. So tell us about this term Wahls Warriors, and can you give us an example?
Yeah, so I acknowledge that, this is hard. We're doing hard work. And so I invite people to think about this journey as the hero's journey. And the hero, where we and our society are facing a big struggle, and then society and we are sort of losing. So we, the individual, the hero, separates from society or the conventional approach to your disease. You learn something really important, hopefully useful. Then you come back and you re-engage in the struggle, and you're much more successful. And so I talk with people and encourage them to view this as, what is your hero's journey? What do you need to learn? What does your tribe need to learn? And how can that help you in your healing journey? And I think people have really embraced that term. They love thinking of themselves in their hero's journey, in themselves as a warrior. So affectionate term is Wahls Warrior. As we're battling this journey, as we're girding ourselves to learn what we need to learn to be more successful.
Wonderful. So speaking of conferences, I have attended a few other conferences that you have as well, and I saw one of your social media posts sitting at the airport at one point was snacking on a cabbage.
Oh yeah.
Give yourself the antioxidants you need.
This is how I fly. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, give us some tips for snacks that you travel with, because you truly live this every day.
Yeah.
So talk to us
You
about
know,
some snacks.
so I want to point out to everyone that all the stuff I talk about in my book, I actually do, because if I decline on my diet, if I'm exposed accidentally to gluten, dairy, or eggs, my face pain turns on. I have horrific levels of pain. If I am exposed to too many toxins, I have pain. If my stress level comes too severe, I'll have pain. So I really have to do all of this stuff. So I travel all over the globe speaking, and I discovered that if I did 3 flights in a month, my face pain would come back. So I had to up my detox protocols. And part of that is I carry a cabbage with me when I fly, because I slice up the cabbage, and cabbage is very happy without a refrigerator. So I can still have my 9 cups of vegetables if I take a head of cabbage with me, which does mean I get stopped going through airport security all the time, because it's, at my carry-on. And as I'm flying, I will be eating cabbage in the plane, because again, that will boost my detox capability in the plane. Because as you fly, you're exposed to more radiation, more plastics in the plane, and then some recirculation of the aerosolized jet fuel. And by making those tweaks, my problem with flying is much better. But of course, most recently, I've not been flying since March.
Sure.
But presumably, we will all get through this, and we'll be back to international travel, and I'll be back to giving these lectures.
I've heard you say before that the facial pain you get if you waver at all from your diet is a blessing, because to you that, forcibly, well, I guess not forcibly, you could choose to have the facial pain, but you're choosing to not. You're choosing to eat this way.
My facial pain is really this tremendous barometer of the level of inflammation in my brain, in my spinal cord, and in my bloodstream. So I could go get blood tests, but I have a minute by minute sensor, biosensor. And I talk about that now at the seminar. We've created a much more robust Wahls behavior change model. And I walk the clinicians through how to teach people how to make these changes. And one of the segments of the lecture is how to teach people how to recognize what's your biosensor. So that, because it's much easier if someone has pain. That's the easiest to deal with. If they have something really visible, skin, that can be very helpful. If you have that you can't see, that's pretty hard to ignore. So we coach clinicians and patients, how do you identify what's your biosensor that's your most sensitive marker that there's been a little unfavorable or favorable change in how you're running the chemistry of life.
Sure. Part of your training also for clinicians is to help with modifications if patients are vegetarian, or with myself, for instance, I've struggled with fructose intolerance and SIBO and spent years on a low FODMAP diet. And so eating all these greens, I had to really slowly work my way up, see what I could tolerate. But talk to me a little bit about the available modifications for those listening in if they are vegetarian.
So, and this is sort of an interesting sidebar. My ancestral health folks, my paleo friends, were sort of horrified that I said, yes, you can be a vegetarian. And I said, I need to be inclusive. And it was really very helpful that my PhD student, who was so important to our study, is a vegetarian for religious reasons. So I thought, okay, I have to guide her on how to fine tune her diet for health reasons, which we did. And then I could use those concepts in the book. And the issues for vegetarians are they're going to be at risk for inadequate protein, because some people just take animal products out of their diet. They still eat a lot of sugar, a lot of processed foods, no vegetables, no protein, not enough fats. And so they're creating nutritional deficiencies. So I educate the vegetarian on how to make sure that they're having a complete diet and what risk factors to think about. B12, iodine, essential fats, and protein being the big ones.
Sure.
And then I also, in my book, I talk about the benefits of ketogenic eating. Because, and the research continues to grow, that ketogenic eating can be very, very helpful for mental health issues, for neurologic issues. for insulin resistance, for diabetes, prediabetes. So that's really helpful. Then, but depending on how you do it, you may drive your cholesterol through the roof, and that's a problem. So we give some guidance on how to manage that.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about the ketogenic aspect of Wahls Protocol. So maybe can you get into level 2 and level 3?
Sure. So
Wahls Paleo Plus and talk a
yeah. So level 2 is the more traditional paleo diet, but now highly structured. We talk about meat, although I've scaled back the meat intake compared to the usual paleo diet. I talk about organ meat, that I want you to have liver 6 to 8 ounces a week, or take liver capsules. And then have, oysters, mussels, tongue, heart, kidneys, other organs as well, bone broth, all of that, very, very helpful. Then fermented foods, kimchi, sauerkraut, fermented nut milks or coconut milk. And then the benefits of raw, and the benefits, if you're going to have nuts and seeds, of soaking them. So you begin the germination process. Plus, they're way more delicious if you've had soaked, sprouted nuts that have been dehydrated again.
And that lessens the lectin danger.
Correct.
Risk.
It makes it, yeah, it makes it much less inflammatory. I do mention the benefit of using a Instant Pot or high pressure cooking. That also lowers the lectin content as well. Sure. And then the third category is the ketogenic diet. So on the high fat diet, you can do it either with medium chain triglycerides or MCTs. And coconut oil, coconut milk is a very tasty way of doing that. The potential downside, some people just have nausea, vomiting, some diarrhea with MCT oils and don't do well with coconut milk. Some people have their lipids go through the roof. And that just means that you don't tolerate the coconut milk as well. Then for that person, we put them on an olive oil diet. So they have lots of olive oil. But if you're using olive oil, then you can't take as many carbs. And so if you're able to tolerate the coconut milk, you can get 50 to 80 grams of carbs. If you're using only olive oil, then you have to limit it to 25 grams of carbs. And that's pretty tough. That's like a big plate of salad. And so in that circumstance, you may decide you want to do time-restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, or periodic fast as an adjunct, and to have more of a low glycemic diet that is still sort of halfway between the level 2 and level 3. You won't be in ketosis. You could modify that by eating just one meal a day, then you'll be in ketosis for a few hours every day. Or you could do the periodic fast and have a calorie restriction of 500 calories to, say, 800 calories for 3 to 5 days. However, because of COVID-19 and the animal models of calorie restriction, that causes a 30% drop in your immune cell lines. So you have a temporary suppression of your immune system during the periodic fast. So during that time period, you're going to be at greater risk for getting COVID. So for that reason, I feel good about time-restricted feeding. I feel good about intermittent fast. I'm uncertain about the risk for periodic fast during this time. So I think you have to be really very cautious about that.
Didn't know that. Very interesting. I want to comment on back to individuals who may not tolerate ketogenic diet or just consuming that many fats. There's one caveat here: if patients have a specific ApoE genotype, they should not be on high saturated fat diet, and that's why it's so important to work with a functional medicine provider or a coach that understands these concepts, just to help personalize.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be on a ketogenic eating, you certainly want to know your ApoE4 status. You want to know your diabetes risk factor, and you need to know your lipid response.
Yes.
Because even if you don't have ApoE4, let's say you happen to be ApoE2, 3 and 2, so you have great ApoE4, but if your cholesterol still goes up to 400 or 300, on a high-fat diet, that is not good for you. And so other strategies would be appropriate.
Yep.
You know, and the other thing that I would stress is that the high-fat diet, that's a very new phenomenon. We've been doing that since I think about 100 years. Mayo Clinic physicians discovered this was a useful way to treat seizures. Our ancestral mothers and fathers were often in ketosis, but it wasn't because they're eating a high-fat diet. They're in ketosis for one of two reasons. One, there was no food and they were starving. So that happened plenty of times. And the other was they had to work their tush off to get the food that they could eat. So there was a lot of physical activity. And if humans do physical activity that's fairly intense for more than 2 hours, we've used up all of our glycogen and we are in ketosis. So every day when we're out there getting food, because it didn't come in the grocery store, folks, we had to work incredibly hard to get the food. And if you were in a clan where the men got the food, so they, traveled 10 miles, 20 miles, got the food, brought it back, carried it back, then the ladies worked their tush off, preparing the food. And so both sides of the clan were working really hard. So we were in ketosis a lot, probably more often on the basis of exercise or starvation. It was never because we had a high-fat diet. That's a really new artificial phenomenon. So while I'm excited about ketosis, I think there's a lot of benefit from ketosis. I think we have to be incredibly cautious about the concept of a high-fat diet.
Wise words. So your message and research have come a long way in the past 5 years. So are there any major updates for us you would like to share? Or maybe you already have.
Well. Oh, I love talking about the research. So yes, some very exciting updates. One, we are analyzing the data for the low-fat diet versus the Wahls diet, so that's swank diet versus Wahls. And I'm actually quite hopeful that we'll be able to submit an abstract for that data and present it to the international meeting this fall. And so probably in September, assuming that meeting will get to still be happening, we'll have that information out. In the meantime, I don't yet know. We're still analyzing the data, so I don't know what we're going to find, but I'm excited that we're at that point. Now, the next thing that I'm so excited about is we're starting our next study. In our next study, because we've never been able to answer the question, Wahls diet, meditation, exercise, no drugs versus standard of care, drugs, for the newly diagnosed MS patient or clinically isolated syndrome. Are they equivalent? Are people harming themselves when they've declined the drugs? Are they doing better when they decline the drugs in taking diet and lifestyle? We don't know. But we're going to begin to answer that question because we have just now gotten approval for our study. Actually, we were approved to do the study back in January, but then COVID happened and we can't do in-person visits. And so we had to redesign the study. We've got approval now for the redesign. And what we're doing is we're doing this all virtually. People who have been offered drugs, newly diagnosed, and want to do diet and lifestyle, we will have a baseline visit. We will train you on the diet and lifestyle and then support you. We'll do reassessments every 3 months, repeat everything at 12 months. It's quality of life studies only, and then we'll be abstracting medical records, and we will do that. I am disappointed that we don't get to do the MRIs. That was very disappointing, but life changes and you have to adapt.
Well, tell us about your new book, actually. You have an expanded edition. So what's new with the revision?
Well, what's new in the revision, I spent a lot more time talking about the science of behavior change. So the patients will find this, I think, incredibly useful. The clinicians will find it useful as well. And then we provide more nuance in the discussion of diet. We talk about histamines, I talk about oxalates, talk about FODMAPs. I talk about how to transition people from the current diet, perhaps to a Mediterranean diet, to level 1, level 2, level 3. In the level 3 version, We talk about time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, periodic fasting. I talk about stem cells, who would be appropriate for stem cells, and how you could get them, and what additional things you'd want to do if you go down the stem cell route. We talk about emotional resilience and metabolic resilience. That the fact that we live in air conditioning, central heating, in a very narrow temperature range, that's harmed us metabolically. That we've designed a very comfortable environment for ourselves, and that's harmed us metabolically. So what can we do to improve our resilience, given that we've created these environments that are very comfortable? And I'm not telling people to give up those environments, because they aren't comfortable and pleasurable, but there are specific steps that you can do that will improve your resilience, so we can still enjoy air conditioning and heating, but have much better resilience.
That's very interesting. That piques my curiosity. Today, before our interview, I knew I had to get to the office 30 minutes early to turn the air down because it was a hot, humid day in Iowa. I needed that air just right for our interview. I look forward to reading that, the revised book, because I don't have that one. But that's interesting. Piquing my curiosity very much so.
Yeah, and because the thing that I've gotten much more interested in is evolutionary biology, and I think this is what I bring to the functional medicine folks, is because I combine ancestral health, evolutionary biology, functional medicine, and my clinical experience with taking care of people who don't have any money. That gives a very unique perspective. Evolutionary biology, we'd be so much further off in healthcare if we understood evolution and use those concepts in designing our interventions for our patients.
Fascinating. Let's go back to the kitchen for a moment here. So I want to ask you a few fun questions. Like, what is your favorite recipe that you cook frequently?
Well, bacon and greens, absolutely. It's one of our favorite meals. I think people often struggle, like, how on earth could you make liver taste good? They're just like, oh my God, they just sound so terrible. So here's a recipe that I got from my great-grandmother for 1890 compendium of cookery, where you slice a bunch of onions, put them in the bottom of your pan, lay chicken livers on top, and then lay bacon strips across all of the chicken livers. Put them in the oven at 225. Start checking them at about 70 minutes. And what you'll want to see is that they might take up to 90 minutes. The outside of the liver will be maroon. You'll slice the inside. It'll be pink, but it won't be oozing anymore. And you'll have this wonderful, soft, custardy texture of the liver that will be incredibly delicious. The bacon is delicious. The onions are yummy. And when I've made that for my kids, they're like, wow, that really is quite yummy. And you make it for guests, and you're like, that is an amazing meal.
Good recipe. I haven't made that one yet. What oils do you cook with? What are the 3 staples on your kitchen counter?
So I will fry with bacon fat, with duck fat, or clarified butter. Okay. I will boil, steam, roast, bake, grill, and then I will put olive oil. So I just went out and got a bunch of my fresh garden herbs, some garlic chives and oregano, minced them and blended them up with olive oil and lemon juice. And so we'll pour the oregano pesto over the steak that we're grilling tonight.
That sounds
so I save the olive oil and mix it with fresh herbs and pour that over stuff after it's been boiled, steamed, or roasted. If I need to fry something, I'll use duck fat, which would be my favorite fat.
Wonderful. So tell us what a day in the life of Terry Wahls looks like, from what you do from a lifestyle standpoint. Are you gardening and growing your own food?
Well, so we'll walk you through what I've done today. So I get up early. I do a 4-7-8 breathing meditation. Then I got up. You can sort of see over my right shoulder a e-stim device. So I hook myself up and I do a strength training workout augmented by electricity. Or every other day I swim. So I'm either zapping and strength training or swimming. Then I follow that with a sauna. And then in the sauna, I do some voice training and some more 7-8 breathing after I've just read for 20 minutes. I do a few more voice training and meditation. Then I take a cold shower. And so that morning routine was about
routine, yeah.
2.5 hours. Then I launch into my day. So today I was doing some reading for pleasure and gardening and taking the dog out for walks. If it was a work week, I would be, doing my meeting with my research teams, et cetera. I would take the time to walk outside, a couple 10-minute walks, because I want to get the sunlight in my eyes so I have better sleep at night. And then in the evening, I'll make my meal. And that's generally the first time that I eat. So I've had water or detox tea, green tea up until then. Then I'll make a meal. Tonight we're having bison steak, mushrooms, roasted garlic. We have asparagus and onions salad from our yard. And I will pour pesto over the steak in the vegetables afterwards. We'll probably also have a kale salad from the yard. And then we'll have our dinner. Before dinner, we have a little gratitude practice where my wife and I reflect on what we're grateful for the day. Our daughter's been staying with us for a few weeks here, so she'll partake in all of that as well. And then we may read or watch something on the TV program. I will do another meditation before off to bed. Some evenings, again, depending on my evening schedule, I'll also take in an ice bath. And I'll tell you, it's very clear if I do the ice bath, the time to fall asleep is shorter, and the depth of my sleep and the quality of my sleep is always superior when I've had the ability to do an ice bath.
Wonderful. That makes me want to ask you 20 more questions, but we'll keep it to just a few more as you've been so gracious with your time today. Wonderful routine. Because of the present pandemic that you referenced, there are many people that are taking disease-modifying drugs who are more at risk for
absolutely,
for contracting the virus. So what can some individuals do who are currently on immunosuppressive drugs to prevent their chance?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing you want to do is you have to stay on your drug. If you abruptly stop your drugs, your inflammatory cytokines will markedly increase. And so if you get the infection, you're going to be at much greater risk of having a severe reaction. So we don't want anyone to abruptly stop. I do want you to lower your inflammatory cytokines. And that really is about diet and lifestyle. There appears to be particular elevations if you're sleep deprived. So priority number one is making sure we are improving the quality of your sleep. So an evening meditation, prayers, and a consistent time of going to bed and getting up in the morning. That'll be really helpful. Number two, improve the quality of your diet. Get your blood sugar lower. So lower carbs, get rid of the sugar, get rid of the flour-based products. I'm not really keen on gluten-free products. Many of them are contaminated. They release too much blood sugar. Better to have vegetables in your protein source. And so improving the quality of your diet, really helpful. And then you could want to be sure that you're getting plenty of organ meat. The organ meat has vitamin A in it, which is very helpful for your immune cells. So liver, 6 to 8 ounces a week. If you don't want to do that, you can pick up the organ meat capsules that we have on our website. But now try that chicken liver recipe. You'd be quite surprised. It's quite delicious. And I'd want you to get some zinc, vitamin C. And you could talk with your practitioner about what is the correct dose for you. The potential downside of zinc supplements is that long term, they may compromise your copper levels because zinc and copper are quite linked. So for a couple months, I think that's good. But long term, it gets to be dicey if we don't know what your copper levels are. It gets, as soon as you start taking supplements, it's much more complicated. I'd much rather you work with a integrative physician practitioner who can help support what supplements to take and for how long.
Wonderful. What about children? So I have a 14-month-old son, and I have a lot of patients who ask me, are you going to allow him to have gluten or dairy or eggs or sugar? I get asked that question a lot. And so I'm curious to know what your opinion is on how we should be raising children these days. Which foods
Well,
we should be avoiding, or is it okay to give a child milk? What are your thoughts?
Okay, so mammals have been giving milk to our infants for a really long time, about 200 million years. So human milk is, of course, my preferred food. That would be superior. And breastfeed that child certainly as long as is practical for you and your family. And then if you're not using human milk, then you'll have to sort out with your healthcare provider which formula is the most appropriate. Sugar is an incredibly addictive compound, and the flour-based products are incredibly addictive compounds. And so, again, you'll have to evaluate your family's circumstances, but if you can keep them from getting addicted to sugar, addicted to high glycemic index foods, you'll be well served. And when I speak with my pediatrician colleagues and friends, they certainly endorse that the Wahls Protocol is a great diet for kids. And what you can do is visualize it's 3/4 of a plate are the greens, colors, sulfur, and 1/4 of the plate is the protein source. And have that as often as appropriate for that child. The issue of dairy, now this is a controversial topic, and I'll give you my thoughts on that. From a evolutionary biology perspective, mammals have been using milk to raise our young for about 200 million years. Humans, we separated from the primates about 6 million years ago. We're still using milk for our young. Once they get weaned, they didn't get any milk. Then the genus Homo, again, getting milk until you got weaned, they didn't get any more, 2.5 million years. Then the species Homo sapiens, 250,000 years. It was just 10,000 years that we've had dairy in some parts of the world. And then you started having milk for longer. So it's a relatively new foodstuff. And depending on your genetics, you may be at greater risk to have cross-reactivity with molecular mimicry for your brain and a higher rate of mental health issues and neurologic issues. And again, some would suggest if we have higher rates of mTOR, because you have a high intake of casein and a high intake of protein, you may have a higher rate of cancers. So there are some downsides with milk. There are some upsides. I think there's certainly milk's a very good food for raising infants, for toddlers. It gets less helpful the older we get. Once we have fused growth plates, then all those growth factors in milk, they can grow us horizontally, not so helpful, or they could grow us pathologically and develop cancer, also not so helpful. So for just that factor, the growth factors, to me is a reason to not have a lot of milk.
Agreed. Helpful answer. So,
but so it's sort of nuanced. I think it's very helpful for infants. Absolutely, we have a lot of reason to think that. Probably helpful for toddlers. A lot of reason to think that. And then it may get less helpful as we get older.
Sure. So, what's your top longevity tip? If you had one.
Hormesis. Intermittently stress your cells with calories, with exercise, with temperature, so that they go through a period of mild stress, followed by rest and recovery.
Wonderful. So, how can listeners come see you as a patient or work with you?
So if you go to terrywalls.com, if you look across the top, there's a link that says work with me, and we'll give you information about the type of practice that I have and what the next steps would be. Um, and the other possibility, of course, is to think about attending our seminar. And that is this year, a remarkable opportunity because we have so much more content and so many more interaction hours.
So the conference is virtual. So really,
The conference is virtual.
Yeah, just to be clear for any listeners.
Anywhere in the world, we have folks listening in from Australia, from Africa, from Europe. I don't know that we have anyone from China. We have people from the Mideast. So it's very fun. We have hundreds and hundreds of people dialing in.
That is a far reach. That's wonderful. So in the show notes, we will also post a link to a one sheet on Dr. Wahls' website where she does share her food pyramid, the Wahls Protocol pyramid. So you can know and reference that as far as how to eat. Of course, read her books, but that pyramid will be just a quick sheet for you to see more of what this diet entails that we've been discussing today. And also copies of her research papers are also on her website. So thank you, Dr. Wahls, so much for being present with us here today. Thank you for not giving up with your own struggles, your pain, and diving into the research and ultimately using your talents and ability to experiment on yourself, but to create this Wahls protocol, which is truly creating health for so many. So my last question to you is, do you feel invincible again?
Well, not quite, but I feel it's just totally empowered because I have so much more meaning in my life than I had back when I was an athlete. Much more satisfied. So maybe I do because now because I have so much more clarity in my life than I had then.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here today and for your story and for all that you do.
Thank you.